Welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. I am Kevin Rogers as we flip the calendar to October as we have made it through the first month of football and now the second month of football and the first month of the NBA and the first month of hockey, all coming up in about a few weeks or so, and Major League Baseball going into the final weekend coming up starting today, and then the playoffs will begin next week. And, of course, NFL and college football continues to roll on. So we have plenty to talk about with that today, as we'll be joined by Mark Franco in just a little bit, VegasInsider.com senior handicapper to talk NFL. Brian Edwards will join us in a little bit as well to talk college football, looking ahead to this weekend. And before we get to that, we want to tell you about our friends at BetMGM. And BetMGM, they have a great deal going on right now that if you bet $10, you're a new player, you bet $10, you can win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Now, here's how it goes. If you bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Now, this is for new players only. You must be 21 or older. And it applies in the following states: New Jersey, Colorado, Indiana, West Virginia, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Virginia, Iowa, Washington, D.C., and Arizona. And you must be 21 years or older to play and in those legal states. And it's a great deal. Bet $10, win $200 if your team scores a touchdown, for new players only. And that is with our friends at BetMGM. So last night, the NFL got going with week number 4, and the Jaguars beat the Bengals. You know, I want to tell you this. So I don't know how many people watch our best bet videos. I know we got a lot last night, but I'm saying those that are watching the live stream now. Now, I had Jacksonville plus 7.5 on the video, and I'm not telling you this after the fact. There's no proof of it. The video is out there. I had Jacksonville plus 7.5. I did not like having to back the Bengals as a little over a touchdown favorite against Jacksonville last night, even though Jacksonville came into the game losers of 18 straight. Now, the Jags did hold a 14-0 lead. They had a chance at a 17 or 21-0 lead late in the second quarter. And I don't really mind that Urban Meyer was going for the kill, especially on the road. But at the same time, I guess in retrospect, you say you kick the field goal, you're up 17-0 going to the half. Instead, you don't get the touchdown. You're only up 14-0. Cincinnati tied it. Jacksonville took the lead. Bengals tied it, and the Bengals eventually kicked the game-winning field goal and won 24-21. Big gut punch for Urban Meyer. Jacksonville actually played well last night. They hung around, but they still have not won a game yet this season. But Jacksonville did cover, though, against Cincinnati. So with that transition, let us bring in our friend, senior handicapper at VegasInsider.com for a plethora of sports, including the NFL, Mark Franco, who is joining us. And Mark, good to see you again. And I want your thoughts on that game last night between the Bengals and Jags. Did you agree with Urban Meyer's call to go for it on that 4th and goal to go up 21-0 before the half?
Well, good morning, Kevin, or good afternoon, I should say, on the East Coast. But thank you again for having me. When you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, I don't see no reason why not to go for it on 4th and goal there. You pretty much got nothing to lose, and you would look like a genius if you went up 21-0 at halftime. But they just couldn't get in the end zone. And, we kind of knew Urban Meyer was going to have his work cut out for him. I mean, going to the NFL after all the years of being a college coach is not an easy transition for anybody. It makes it even more difficult when you go to a franchise like Jacksonville that have just been, an absolute mess for years. So it was a good game, though. I give Joe Burrow a lot of credit. Kid's got some moxie. Doesn't seem to get rattled, even as a second-year player. And I think he had all the confidence in the world that he was going to lead his team to that victory yesterday late in the game.
Yeah, now the Bengals, Mark, at 3-1, and a pretty impressive start for them, considering the fact that they were a last place team last year, and this AFC North, which again, Baltimore's been living on the edge so far this season. Cleveland got a good win last week, and the Steelers, they found a way to beat Buffalo in week 1, but they have not looked good the last 2 weeks. So now we got kind of an interesting race here through the first few weeks.
The Steelers are definitely a mess. Handicapping Steeler games moving forward, at least for the next couple of weeks, be cautious. I mean, Roethlisberger is definitely not the same. They have a lot of new pieces on their offensive line. Their defense has been solid for the last few years. They might not be that solid this year. Baltimore, you're totally on the money there. They're living on the edge. Interesting game for them this week when they head to Denver to take on the 3-0 Broncos. And I think Cleveland is, Cincinnati at 3-1, obviously, that's somewhat of a surprise. But the Cleveland Browns are the class of this division. They have so many weapons on the offensive side of the ball. They can run the ball. They have a solid defense. So this is pretty much, I know it's only week 4, Kev, coming up, but I think it's Cleveland's division to lose, although Baltimore would probably be right there at the end of the season.
Now, Mark, let's look ahead to this week in the NFL, and let's begin with the Colts and the Dolphins. And you saw this game up close and personal last week against the Raiders. Before we get to this matchup, just looking at last week's game, how did you think Jacoby Brissett played? It seemed like early it didn't look very good. I thought he made some really big plays on 4th down late in that game. He had the throw to Devontae Parker to continue the drive. He scored on the 4th down at the goal line to eventually get the game to overtime. Made a big throw to Gesicki in overtime. What did you think about Brissett and his play despite the slow start last week?
Real quick, if whether you live in Vegas or you're out of town and you want to come to town to see your favorite team, go to a Raider game. Stadium was awesome. Traffic issues were a non-issue. They made a big deal about not enough parking. Stadium's absolutely beautiful. Got to see a great game. Went to overtime, to the final play of overtime. And the seats I had were pretty good. And I could see Brissett. He did not look like an NFL quarterback for most of that game. He definitely struggled in the game. But he did show moxie there at the end in the 4th quarter and brought him back. It was a 14-0 lead. Then we got to see a safety, 14-2. Before you know it, it was 25-14 Raiders. Dolphins hung in there in the 4th quarter, came back, tied the game. I was very impressed by that. Overtime went back and forth, and it was a matter of who had the ball last, and the Raiders had the ball last. And a lot of people are saying how surprising the Raiders are at 3-0. I would say a little bit surprising, but their defense is really just improved from a season ago exponentially. I mean, their secondaries played very well, and when it comes to offense, the Raiders have the number one offense in the National Football League, and that's a lot to do with Derek Carr. Their running game finally came on. You had Barber as a running back who hasn't played in a long time. Second half and overtime, he was very effective in that game. So are the Raiders a playoff team? I think so, especially with the way that things have kind of panned out in the early going in the AFC West.
Now let's look at this matchup in Miami on Sunday, Mark. And the Colts are 0-3. They didn't play well against Seattle week 1. They hung with the Rams in week 2. And last week they had their opportunities against the Titans. They settled for a lot of short field goals. They ended up losing that game. So Carson Wentz, we know, is not healthy. But, still the Colts are not that far off from the Dolphins, considering Jacoby Brissett's the backup. And you can say Jacoby Brissett, it's his revenge game against Indianapolis. But do you trust the Dolphins here laying points against this winless Colts team?
Well, the Colts have probably been one of the biggest disappointments so far in the early going, because a lot of people had them pegged as a playoff team, if not winning the AFC South. But their offense, the offense for the Colts is an issue. They're not a good running team. Carson Wentz is obviously not 100%, and even when he is, I'm not sure he's that good of a quarterback. This game should come down to defense. Both teams are pretty good on the defensive side of the ball. I can't see a shootout down there in Miami. Is the Colts going to have any kind of effect with the humidity down there? I think so. When it comes to the Dolphins defense, they give up tons of yards, but they're very opportunistic. And I think looking at the Dolphins and the defensive side of the ball against Carson Wentz, I think the Dolphins are going to have some opportunity to turn him over, no question. Slightly towards Miami, although kind of tough coming back from the West Coast. But I think Miami's a tough enough team that they should be able to win this game over the Colts.
Totals and also one note.
Awful low total at 42 for an NFL game. That's why I said it should lean towards a defensive type of game.
And also, Mark, one other note, not that this means much, but Brian Flores 3-0 straight up against the spread as a home favorite in his limited time as head coach. So they've taken care of business in these games. And again, no Tua for a little bit. And the Dolphins get the Buccaneers next week. So that's not going to be an easy task. So now let's take a look out west, Mark. And you have the Cardinals and the Rams meeting up in Los Angeles. And LA, big win over Tampa Bay last week. Arizona, they're 3-0. So you got a monster showdown between these two teams, where the NFC West, we know every game is going to be big when any of these teams hook up.
I think it's the best division in football right there with the AFC West. But, the Cardinals starting off 3-0, I wouldn't say it's a huge surprise. They were down last week against Jacksonville, did what they had to do to not only win the game, but get the cover. And this Rams team is really feeling the ropes. The Rams have been a good team the last couple of years, obviously with a Super Bowl trip just a few years ago against the Patriots. I'm going to lean towards the Rams in this game. I don't know if it's going to be an official play or not. I just think Stafford is playing exactly the way the Rams want him to play, within himself. He's not put in situations where he makes mistakes like he did when he played all those years in Detroit. And when you talk about defense, obviously the Rams are one of the best in the business. Cardinals haven't played a defense like this yet so far this year. I think the number's right on the money with the Rams 4. Total 54.5. Seems kind of high, but I don't think so, because as good as the Rams defense is, the way Kyler Murray has been playing at an MVP level, and that offense, they pretty much can score points on anybody. How many they're going to be able to score, we'll have to wait and see. But this should be, I would say, obviously with the Patriots-Tampa Bay game that I'm kind of sick of talking about, this to me is the next biggest game on the board. Can't wait to watch this game. I think it should be a very entertaining game, especially if the Cardinals come with their A game.
Now, Mark, another one of the late kickoffs, the Ravens and Broncos in Denver. And this is a big proving ground, obviously, for the Broncos, who are 3-0, and they're trying to dethrone the Chiefs, just like the Raiders and Chargers are in the AFC West. And now they have their quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, but everyone's going to question the Broncos' schedule early. They can't control who they played, but they beat the teams they needed to beat. And Baltimore, like we said earlier, you can make the argument, Mark, that Baltimore should have beaten Las Vegas, should have lost to Kansas City, and maybe should have lost to Detroit. But instead, 2 of those games went their way. 1 game didn't. So the Ravens at 2-1, the Broncos at 3-0, and we'll see if Denver passes their first real test of the season.
Yeah, the Ravens did not play well against the Lions last week. Obviously, about as fortunate as you can get, making an NFL record field goal. That when that ball hit the crossbar, Kev, I was like, it was 50-50 whether that was going to go over or not. It just got the perfect bounce there. And Lamar Jackson, as good as he is, as good as he can run the ball, his passing game needs to be elevated to the next level. And I don't quite see that yet. And when it comes to the Broncos, look, they beat 3 pretty miserable teams. They beat the Giants, they beat the Jets, and they beat the Jaguars. Is that an impressive resume? Not by any stretch. But when it comes to the Broncos, I don't care who they've beaten. They're 3-0. Teddy Bridgewater has just looked absolutely like exactly what the Broncos needed at quarterback. So I'm going to say great decision by the coach to start him when the season started over Drew Lock. And when we talk about the Broncos, first thing that comes to my mind pretty much consistently is their defense. I'm sorry. Defense is just stellar. Von Miller has shown that he's back after that gruesome injury last year. And I think it's going to be hard for just about any team to go into Denver and beat them. But this is a game I got to do a lot more homework with before I might get comfortable with a selection. The over 44.5 on the low side for an NFL game, but we're talking about two teams that have better defenses than they do offenses.
Now, the final game, Mark, we'll go over. I know we'll skip the Bucs and Patriots. Nobody's talked about that all week. So
it's just like a soap opera. I'm tired of hearing about the soap opera. I just want the game to begin, so to speak.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens on Sunday night. Now, Monday night, Mark, I mean, look, the Raiders and Chargers, they played two really good games last year. The road team won each time. The Chargers had that drop at the end in the game in LA last year, and then Justin Herbert had the quarterback sneak in overtime to beat the Raiders that second time around in Vegas. And these two teams it's them and the Broncos going after the Chiefs. And I'm not going to say Kansas City's window is closing, but so far 1-2 start. And the Chargers, they've won 6 of their past 7 games now going back to last season. So they got some momentum on their side. Chargers favored here against the Raiders on Monday night in LA.
Obviously, an impressive win by the Chargers last week, being able to beat Kansas City in Kansas City. So that counts for quite a bit in my book. The Chargers are pretty much what I call a complete team. They don't do anything especially fantastic, but they do everything well. Their defense is pretty good. Offense behind Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, I'm a big fan of. I'm still ticked off to this day that the Dolphins didn't draft him instead of Tua, but it is what it is. And the Chargers, again, the AFC West is a very tough division, but the Chargers look like they can be a playoff team. And obviously the Raiders look like they can be a playoff team too. The Raiders to go 3-0 and have to win 2 of your first 3 games in overtime. And the game last week lasted right until the very last seconds of overtime. Will the Chargers come in the Raiders come in with a little bit of a hangover? Maybe, but this should be a great game to watch. The line opened up a little higher. Now it's settling for what I'm seeing just about everywhere around town here in Vegas. The line is settling Chargers -3. 51's an interesting total, kind of a key number. I think this game can go over the total. Both teams' offenses are going to come to play. I think the Raiders' defenses, they played above their head, so to speak. So I look for the Chargers to be able to put up some points in this game. I think the number's right on. Slight lean towards over the total come Monday night, Kev.
Yeah, it should be a pretty good game on Monday. Got a lot of good matchups this week in the NFL. And, again, the Brady thing's going to take over all the headlines. But still, you got a lot of really good games. And we'll see if teams like the Jets and the Giants, if they could break through. And is there any, I hate to use the term, but ugly underdog that you could see coming through this week or not yet?
I won't say they're an ugly underdog, but I'm squarely looking at the Panthers-Dallas game. Dallas coming off a Monday night game. Granted, they're at home again. Carolina's looked very good through the first couple of weeks. Sam Darnold has played obviously better than expectations compared to when he was with the Jets. He's playing fantastic. Carolina's defense has been very, very good through the first 3 weeks of the season. Just thought the number here was a little bit high at 4.5. So there's one dog I am looking at so far would be Carolina going into Dallas and giving them a game. If don't see no reason why they might not be able to win that game outright as well. I think two evenly matched teams. Dallas does have the better offense, but Carolina has the better defense and has played very well. So that's a game I'm looking at taking a dog. If taking dogs in the NFL, Kev, I always try to get through a key number of 4.5, as opposed to taking a dog that might be +3. Doesn't sound like much of a difference, but in the long run, at the end of the season, it can count for a few more wins, catching a 4.5 as opposed to a 3.
Mark Franco, senior handicapper at VegasInsider.com, been with us since basically the beginning, and he handicaps everything: NFL, college football, Major League Baseball, basketball's coming up in a few weeks, and Yankees going to hold on?
Well, got a 2-game lead with 3 to go. Don't see why not. I really want them to have that wild card game at home. I think that's, when you're talking to this crappy situation with the wild card, which I've never liked since it got instituted, but, one game after a whole season. Look at the Dodgers situation, playing the entire year. If they have to play a 1-game playoff with the season they've had, anything can happen in a 1-game playoff. But I think the Yankees do hold on. It'd be the Yankees, Red Sox in that one-game take-all wild card, but it will be at Yankee Stadium. And Kev, just like to say, been crushing it in Major League Baseball this year. It's not one of my better sports, but doing very well. I think I'm the guaranteed leader on VI. So looking forward to this season finally coming to a long end and playoffs start next week.
Yep, and looking forward to you could check out Mark's picks for baseball as well on VegasInsider.com. Mark, we appreciate the time as always. We will talk to you soon.
Love it, Kev. Do it anytime, man. You have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, thanks a lot. There is Mark Franco. And, look, there's no guarantee, though, the Yankees are playing the Red Sox. Seattle's tied with Boston going into tonight's action. So no guarantee just yet on that, but we'll see how it turns out. Should be a fun weekend of baseball coming up. Now let's talk some college football with our man, Brian Edwards. Brian, welcome.
What's up, K-Raj?
It's good to talk to you again. Good to see you again. And I guess I'll give you 30 seconds or so to rail on Urban Meyer if you want.
Well, fortunately, I took Cincinnati at halftime, -7, down 14, so +7 adjusted. I had a boatload on Cincy -7 for the game. I still lost a little, but I got most of it back. So I can't get on him too bad today. His team did cover, but I love that he's got that bagel in the left side of the column. The W column is empty.
Urban puts the O in Ohio.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. I like that.
You like that one? I saved that one just for you. All right, let's talk some college football for the weekend, and let's begin with this Ole Miss-Alabama matchup in Tuscaloosa. Now, you have the two Heisman frontrunners right now. We know that means nothing year in and year out. It always changes, but Matt Corral and Ole Miss, and when you look at the Alabama side, Bryce Young. This was a shootout last year, over 1,000 yards. What did Bama have, like 600 or 700 yards in that game against Ole Miss last year? But they won, didn't cover. So what are your thoughts on this matchup now going back to Alabama?
Well, I don't think Alabama is quite as strong just throughout the roster as they have been for, mostly, or especially these last 3 or 4 teams, I think have been super duper nasty. I don't think they're that good this year, but I do think Bryce Young is every bit as good as Tua and Mac and Jalen. I think this kid is the real deal, big time. And, I'm kind of just waiting because I want to see what these team totals are, particularly in the first quarter and the first half, and I might be looking to fire on the over on both teams. But I don't have those numbers yet. So if tomorrow morning, and I don't know if they're going to be. I feel like they came out on a Friday night one time, but the other weeks I feel like they've mostly been Saturday morning. But anywho, I haven't made a decision on the side because I think I'm going to be more interested in those team totals. But if they're too high for me tomorrow, I'll probably take Ole Miss. I lean Ole Miss. I think their defense has improved. And look, Alabama did not get a 2-possession lead until 3 minutes and change were left last year. And then Ole Miss answered. They had gone back and forth, but one team being tied or up 7 the whole game until Ole Miss had to settle for a field goal. And then Alabama went up 11 on a touchdown. Then Ole Miss came down. They got a field goal again to cut it to 8. But then Alabama got a drive and scored a touchdown with I want to say a minute and change left. But I think Ole Miss is going to hang in this game for sure. Now, if Bryce makes some mistakes or if they can cause a fumble or two, they could be in business. But so I would say a lean to Ole Miss plus the 14.5. I'm probably going to be more interested in the team totals over for either or both teams, but I don't know those numbers yet. And if those numbers are too high, I'll probably just have a small play on Ole Miss.
Now, what are your thoughts on this other big game coming up on Saturday? We'll get to Arkansas in a second. Oh, to Cincinnati and Notre Dame. And you don't get Notre Dame that often as an underdog. They've been at home, a home underdog. But the Cincinnati team, we know they could score. And Luke Fickell, of course, he could end up being the coach of USC next year. Who knows? I mean, he's made a great ascension from Ohio State Didn't work out, went to Cincinnati. He's put them on the map. They're going to the Big 12 soon. But what do you think about this game with Notre Dame getting some points at home?
Hard pass for me. Notre Dame's offensive line is really struggling. They've got some injuries there. And, if you didn't – I didn't really watch their game last week, but reviewing the box score, that was a very, very misleading final. A couple pick sixes, mid-ish fourth quarter. But credit to Notre Dame. I mean, they're undefeated. I don't know if they've made an official announcement on Jack Cohn, but I know he's a little banged up. I think he's trending toward playing, but I just don't know if he's 100%. Look, I love Cincy's quarterback. I love their defense. I'm not very enamored with their receivers, though. And Notre Dame's got a pretty solid defense. This is just a hard pass for me. I can't get that first half at Indiana out of my mind for Cincy. They really struggled. Now, to their credit, they made some plays there late in the second quarter. They got a fortunate call against McFadden that stung Indiana linebacker, and then they took care of business in the second half. But this is just a hard pass for me.
Now, let's look at this Arkansas-Georgia game. And Arkansas, they have made incredible strides this year. And you look at what Sam Pittman's done, that Arkansas was just in the dumps for a while. And they were better last year, great ATS team last year. And so far this year, they just destroyed Texas at home. They beat Texas A&M in Dallas this past week. Two really good victories. And they pull away from Rice in that opener where it looked like they had no chance of covering. They beat Georgia Southern convincingly. So are you buying into Arkansas competing with Kirby Smart's Bulldogs coming up tomorrow?
Absolutely. 4-0, both straight up and against the spread. They've won by margins of 21, 19, 35, and 10. They scored 17 points on a very good A&M defense with the quickness last week. They kind of just managed the game from there with the big lead. Now, A&M got that field goal last play of the first half, and then and that was after a fourth down stop where Arkansas was they weren't in the red zone yet, but they're fairly deep in A&M territory. And look, Georgia's defense certainly passes the eye test. There's no doubt about that. And right now they're ranked number one in total defense and scoring defense in the nation. But look at the offenses they've played. Clemson, UAB, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. Those teams, respectively, starting with Clemson, and I'll go in order, are ranked number 105 in the nation in scoring offense. UAB is number 85 out of 130 FBS teams. South Carolina is number 104. Vandy is number 129 out of 130. So, again, I think they're a top 5 defense, but we don't know if they're the best defense in the country. They haven't faced an offense that has a pulse yet. And JT Daniels is also banged up. So is KJ Jefferson. Jefferson did eventually come back to that game last week. It was diagnosed as a bruised knee. We'll see where he's at. But the backup, Malik Hornsby, is a track star. He's got speed galore, and that could come. He's a little raw throwing the ball, but that speed could come in handy if he has to play against Georgia's fierce pass rush. And, JT Daniels is dealing with a lat muscle injury, and, we'll see on him. But I think that's kind of a wash with Jefferson and Daniels both banged up. I can't turn down Arkansas catching this big number. And, the win over Clemson is not aging very well for the Bulldogs.
Now let's take a look at another SEC matchup. The Gators taking on Kentucky in Lexington. And Florida, for a long time, they owned Kentucky. Kentucky wasn't very good in football, but they've improved. They've improved over the years. And you look at what Mark Stoops has done. Obviously the SEC East is going to be Georgia, Florida first, and then everyone else.
Say that differently. Florida, Georgia. Oh man.
Let's wait and see what happens. Okay, Florida had it last year. Fine, I'll give you that one. Florida had it last year. Let's see. Right as of this moment, Georgia's ahead of them, but we'll wait and see until the cocktail party what happens. But South Carolina was in that mix. They've fallen off. Missouri was kind of in that mix for a little bit. They've fallen off. Vandy, forget about them. They're going to get deported from the conference soon. But you look at Kentucky, they've made a lot of strides, and even Tennessee, they've fallen off. Kentucky, would you say right now they're the third best team in the SEC East? Is that fair?
That's obvious in my mind. Absolutely.
But then after that, what's the gap after that? It feels like there's a huge gap after that to everyone else.
Yeah, and Kentucky committed a bunch of turnovers against Missouri. They were going in to score. Chris Rodriguez fumbled at the goal line. They were about to be up 28-7 on Mizzou at halftime, and they should have beat Mizzou by at least 3 touchdowns a few weeks back. And that's the most impressive thing about Kentucky right now. They're 4-0, but they're dead last in the nation in turnover margin, -9. And Chris Rodriguez leads the SEC in rushing, but he is coughing up the ball multiple times a game here recently. And I was so impressed with Will Levis the first couple of games. And I still think he's got a really good arm. He's got good size. He can move. He can run it if you need him to. But he has forced some balls and made some bad mistakes here the last 2 weeks. Had 3 turnovers against UT Chattanooga. And they kept turning. South Carolina's defense kept giving their offense a chance to win that game last week. Kentucky was pretty fortunate to escape, but it was their good defense that allowed that to happen. As you were noting, Florida's dominated Kentucky 33-1 in the last 34. They haven't lost in Lexington since '86, but they have been extremely fortunate to escape their last 3 trips in 2019, 2017, and 2015. They won by 5 and 15. They won by 1 in 17, and Kentucky missed a field goal last play of the game. And in 19, had to rally. That was, when Franks got hurt, Trask came in down 13 and rallied them in the fourth quarter. Ended up getting a kind of a late touchdown to make it an 8-point victory. But Florida was, fortunate, if not downright lucky, to win all 3 of those games. With all that said, Mullen, he lies about injuries all the time, but when he said Richardson on Wednesday is 100%, then I think he's ready to go. Now, I don't know about Elam, our star DB, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. He didn't play last week, a minor knee issue. Mullen said he was probable on Monday, but I don't believe Mullen on injuries. I do on the Richardson thing because of the way he stressed 100%. So that all makes me think that if this were to move to 7, I might make a small play on the Gators. I lean Florida, but it's a pass right now. But it's gone from 8.5 to 7.5. If it were to get to 7, I might maybe take the Gators for a little bit tomorrow, but I'll probably just be looking for some in-game value. If Kentucky were to get out to a lead, I would definitely fire on the Gators if I could get them like -4 or fewer.
Are you surprised that Florida's played so well in this post-Kyle Trask era? I get they lost to Alabama. They were down. They came back. They had a shot there to tie it late. But are you surprised that they've reloaded this quickly?
Nope. I said Emory Jones was ready to thrive, and that prediction didn't look very good the first 2 weeks, but I think he's played outstanding the last 2 weeks, and now we add Richardson back to the mix this week. No, I'm not surprised at all. I think I had Florida, I want to say 7th or 6th in my preseason power rankings. The defense, you knew the defense had to get better. I mean, we did have some injuries on the defense last year. Jeremiah Moon has come back. He missed basically, I think, all but 2 or 3 games last year. He's the second leading tackler right now. He's playing lights out. And there's some young guys in the secondary are playing pretty good. We lost Ventrell Miller, but no, I'm not surprised. I knew the defense surely had to be better, and it is. And I think we have like a top 20 defense right now, and I just trust Mullen offensively. And it's a different offense. It's a running-based offense, but it's equally effective.
Okay, the late game, Brian, the Battle of the Tigers, Auburn and LSU. And LSU laying a field goal here. Auburn, we know the road problems they've had with Bo Nix, and they lost that Penn State game a few weeks ago. They struggled last week at home against Georgia State. And, again, it's going to be a big battle going to LSU. The Tigers have I should say the LSU Tigers, they're both Tigers, but LSU has put it together since losing the UCLA game at the beginning. And you trust laying the points here with LSU?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer if you could buy the half point to 3, as long as it doesn't cost more than like -130 price. huge revenge game for LSU. They got absolutely humiliated on the Plains last week, 48-11, but it was 48-3 late. Max Johnson threw a long touchdown pass late in the fourth quarter. And look, LSU fans have a reason to believe again because they've got themselves a big-time quarterback in your boy Brad Johnson's son, Max. 15-3 TDI-INT ratio through 4 games. He had an 8-1 TDI-INT ratio last year. So for his career, 23 touchdown passes, only 4 interceptions. He started 6 games. He's 5-1. The only loss at UCLA when the defense couldn't make a tackle the whole night. And I don't know if they're getting enough credit for their defensive performance last week. They shut down Mississippi State for 3 quarters and change. They had a 28-10 lead early fourth, and they kind of went, prevent type of defense. And Miss State dinked and dunked and had 2 time-consuming touchdown drives to make that score look a little better. But LSU was very impressive last week on both sides of the ball. Auburn, not so much. I don't even know if Harson's announced a starter. I don't know how he can't go to TJ Finley after Finley saved him last week with that miracle play on 4th and 9 when a couple people missed blocks. He had guys all over him. He somehow escaped and threw a touchdown pass and hooked me up because I took Auburn minus 14 in the second half, trailing by 12. And then my man Smoke Monday got the pick 6. But I like LSU here at home, revenge, better quarterback play. Go Tigers.
What else do you like outside of the SEC this week? What else kind of sticks out? There's obviously a lot of games coming up in college, but anything else that catches your eye?
Yeah, I love Boston College. If Phil Dracovic wasn't hurt, I'd be calling for the outright upset. I made Clemson a 7-point favorite. Boston College is 17-6-1 against the spread in its last 24 games as a road underdog. At Death Valley last year, they had a 28-10 lead late in the second quarter. Clemson got a field goal right before half, but they were up by 15 at halftime. Clemson rallies. They won 34-28 with BC easily covered as a 24.5-point underdog. They're catching Clemson at the perfect time. Clemson stud D tackle Brian Breesy tore his ACL last week. He was first team All-ACC selection last year. Tyler Davis, their other stud defensive tackle, who was the first team All-ACC selection in 2019, but missed 5 or 6 games with injury last year. He got hurt 2 weeks ago against in that ho-hum 14-8 win over Georgia Tech. He's out another 6 weeks. They're starting running back Will Shipley, 5-star recruit. He gets hurt last week. He's out a month. The heart and soul of their defense, James Skowski, the linebacker, he got hurt against NC State, didn't return. Dabo said on Monday that he'd be good, but I don't know. I won't bore you with all the abysmal offensive statistics, but they are gross, and they can't score offensively. And now they've got depth issues at running back. Lynn J. Dixon transferred last week. And I won't bore you with BC's stats either because they played a soft schedule until Mizzou last week. But they're pretty much in the top 25 in the nation in pretty much every category on both sides of the ball. And the backup QB, Dennis Grosel, he's now making his 11th career start. He has a 19-8 career TDI-INT ratio, 4 career rushing touchdowns, and his presence was one of the reasons I was so confident in backing Boston College's season win total over 7. Now, I thought we could survive a Dracovic injury. I didn't want it to be season ending on the first possession of week 2, but it is what it is.
Now, not to totally kill Dabo on this one, but you don't look as smart when you don't have Trevor Lawrence. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
What's been the problem at quarterback?
I don't know. Uiagalelei looked great last year. He had those 2 starts. He looked awesome. 5-star QB. Looked fantastic at Notre Dame last year. I want to say he threw for like 390. Wasn't his fault they lost that game. I have no idea what's wrong with him. I bet on them against Georgia, and I watched that game. I was paying attention in the fourth quarter against Georgia Tech. And I kind of there were so many good games in that 3:30 time slot last week. I was kind of back and forth from a bunch of games, but I caught a little bit of it. But I really, other than the Georgia game, I haven't watched play by play. So, but he was awful in that game. I don't know what the deal is. But
who's the best team in the ACC right now? Is it NC State, you say, or is it still Clemson?
It's still Clemson, but watch out for Wake Forest, man. And I was looking at Wake Forest's schedule. That's another game I like this week. I love Wake Forest. Their last 8 home games, they've won 7 of them by double digits. The other one they lost to Clemson, top-ranked Clemson last year, but they covered. And I'm looking at their schedule. And by the way, I got Wake at 6.5 early in the week at home to Louisville, but it's moved to 7.5, so I would buy that half point to the key number. But looking at their schedule, they're at the Cuse next week, then an open day, then actually a really tough tester at Army, but then Duke at home. I mean, if they can survive that 4-game stretch, Louisville at the Cuse, at Army, and Duke, they are at North Carolina and could be undefeated November 6th. And that is a non-conference game, it says in my Phil Steele mag in parentheses. Like, the North Carolina game doesn't count toward the conference. So that's good for them. If they lost, it wouldn't count in the conference race. But they go to Clemson 2 weeks later anyway. And they finished at Boston College in cold weather. But Sam Hartman, 9-1 TDI and T ratio. Watch out for the Demon Deacons. Clausen can coach.
I want to get one more game from you, and I want your objective opinion, okay? I want total objectivity, Brian.
I like Syracuse. Is that where you're going?
You think they're going to beat them outright or just cover?
I don't know. I just made a small play because one of my accounts went to 5.5, and I bought it to 6. It was just a small play. It's not making the cut on my VI plays, but I lean Syracuse. So Garrett Schrader, the transfer from Mississippi State, I watched a good chunk of that Liberty game. I mean, Syracuse is playing pretty good defense this year, and they can run the ball. And this Schrader kid, he's not very accurate throwing the ball, but he can throw it deep. He's got a big arm. I mean, I worry about his throwing, but he can run the ball big time. And he's fast. I don't know if you remember that play. It was like 4th and 10 in the Mississippi State game his freshman year, and he dove from like 5 yards out and did like a helicopter, like Elway against the Packers. And he's got big-time athleticism. And looks like DeVito's done. Dino has sat him in favor of this kid. I think Syracuse got a chance tomorrow. We shall see.
Anything in the NFL sticks out to you, 1 or 2 plays?
Man, I'm running behind on my NFL this week. I was so invested in the Bengals last night, and unfortunately, I took them at halftime to get some back. But no, I'm behind.
Okay.
On the NFL. Now the Giants, I've got a good stat though. I tweeted it earlier this week. They're either 19 or 20-3. Their last, whatever it would be, 22 or 23 as a road underdog at New Orleans.
It's a good one. I mean, look, the Giants they've been competitive in that role. I didn't like them last week as a favorite against the Falcons because I thought that was kind of a fishy line. And I don't know how you can lay points with the Giants. But look, New Orleans is playing their first home game of the season on Sunday, and they're off a big win at New England. And the Saints, again, we went week 1, good Jameis against Green Bay. Week 2 against Carolina, bad Jameis. Week 3, all right, Jameis. He didn't throw 5 touchdowns, but the defense took care of business. Now you go against the Giants, you're going to get bad Jameis.
I smell 2 turnovers from Jabu. Yeah, I'll probably be on the Giants. Still 7.5. I'd love for it to go to 8 or 8.5.
Look, I mean, I wonder if the upsets are going to come again this week in the NFL. But again, we'll wait and see. Brian Edwards, you can check him out at Vegas Insider. Also check him out on Twitter at VegasBEdwards. Brian, as always, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, K-Raj.
All right, there is Brian Edwards. You can also find myself and Brian, actually more of his best bets for the SEC this week, as he gives you the in-depth look at Arkansas, Georgia, as well as LSU, Auburn, Missouri, Tennessee, and then the non-conference game between South Carolina and Troy. And you can check that out on our YouTube channel, our Saturday's SEC Best Bets. And also you can find our free picks page on our college football at VegasInsider.com. My thanks to Brian for joining us here. And before we get out of here in just a few minutes, my best bets last week in the NFL went 1-1. We had the Chiefs loser, Dolphins winner. So this week, here's what we got. The Jets, +7. Now, New York has been terrible. Okay. Jacksonville have been terrible. They covered last night. Now the Jets are getting 7 at home against Tennessee. Titans have some injuries right now. Tennessee did cover against Indianapolis last week. They weren't great. Titans really haven't been great in any game this year. I mean, you can argue, oh, maybe this will be the game they'll get right in. But I feel like this line's a little short. That Tennessee, considering the Jets have just been destroyed the Carolina game, they hung a little bit in the second half, but they got run against the Patriots and they got run by the Broncos. But the Titans really aren't great defensively. So at least that's the one thing I'll say about the Jets this week. So Jets and then the Cardinals. Now, Cliff Kingsbury as a road underdog, 8-2-2 against the spread. And the Cardinals have never beaten the Rams since Sean McVay has been the head coach of LA. 8-0 he is against the Cardinals. But getting points for the Cardinals here on the road, LA off the big one over Tampa Bay last week, I'm going to lean towards Arizona here. So Jets and Cardinals as the best bets for this week, taking a few underdogs in the NFL. So at least Monday, we'll know who well, I can't say who's going to be in the playoffs because we know everyone in the playoffs in Major League Baseball. It's just the wild card we're going to find out because all the other spots are clinched. Even though the National League West is still up in the air, the Giants can clinch it this weekend and relegate the Dodgers to the wild card game. So Dodgers will play the Cardinals and one game, loser, go home. And the American League, we already know it's going to be Astros White Sox in one of the divisional matchups. Then the Rays are going to play whoever comes out of the wild card. So you could get Rays Yankees. You could get Rays Red Sox. You could get Rays Mariners. And Seattle's actually had a really good head-to-head record against Tampa Bay this year. So it's probably the last team. I feel like the Rays rather see the Yankees than the Mariners. But Seattle plays LA this weekend, the Angels. And the Red Sox take on the Nationals in D.C. The Yankees face the Rays in New York. So when it's all said and done, the Yankees and Rays can hook up a lot of times coming up, assuming the Yankees get in the wild card and they end up beating whoever they beat, then they face Tampa Bay again. But, a lot of baseball coming up next week, looking ahead to the playoffs inside of Major League Baseball. And then we're a week away from hockey starting and also a few weeks away from the NBA starting. So that is very, very exciting stuff. Before we get out of here, I want to tell you again about BetMGM. And if you bet $10 as a new player, you can win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. This is for new players only, must be 21 or over, and is legal in the following states: New Jersey, Colorado, Indiana, West Virginia, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Virginia, Iowa, D.C., and Arizona. Full terms and conditions apply. And for new players only again. And that is BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. So that's what you got now. If you are a new player, check out BetMGM. And BetMGM, a proud sponsor here of the Daily Insider on VegasInsider.com. And we will talk to you again on Monday. Dave Sharapan will join us on Monday to review the weekend in the NFL and college football. Also, our best bet videos are up for NFL, Bucks, Patriots, Raiders, Chargers, the two primetime games still to come in week 4 of the NFL. And you can find those on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Daily Insider. If you missed any of it, you can find it on our homepage and also on our YouTube channel as well. We'll talk to you again on Monday. And coming up this weekend, we surely hope that you win your games. And best of luck with your bets.